Hi, I'm Theolasa. My sister demanded I babysit her son so they could all sip cocktails in Hawaii without me. When I said no, she slapped me. And my mother? She laughed and said, well, someone has to stay behind. But what they didn't know is that I'd been paying everything, their rent, their bills, their peace. So I walked out, canceled it all, and 1 hour later they weren't laughing anymore. Before we dive in, what would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever been the one left behind just because you were too kind? Let us know in the comments, because this story, it's for anyone who's ever been treated like an afterthought and finally said no. The dryer buzzed and I folded the last warm towel with a kind of slow care, smoothing the edges like it might settle the tightness in my chest. I'd just come from a 10-hour shift at the library. My feet were aching, but I was here again, at Mom's house, folding laundry that wasn't mine, cooking dinner I wouldn't eat in a house I'd quietly kept afloat for over 2 years. The scent of overripe bananas clung to the air. Lucas, my 7-year-old nephew, was running in socks, juice box swinging from his hand like a weapon. I opened my mouth just to warn him, and that's when it happened. He crashed into me. Sticky red juice splashed down my work flats and the hem of my slacks. Before I could even look down, Vera's voice cut through the air like a knife. God, Theasa, can you not just watch him for 5 minutes without screwing something up? She was standing in the doorway like some bored queen, arms crossed, wearing the kind of leggings that looked expensive but screamed leisure. She wasn't even watching him. I was, like I always did. I didn't say anything. Just grabbed a paper towel, dabbed at my shoes, and looked over at Mom, who was setting the table like nothing had happened. Dinner in 5, she said, like we were just a nice normal family, like her eldest daughter hadn't just humiliated the one person keeping this house running. I wiped my hands and went back to the kitchen, where I'd finished the roast chicken hours ago. I set the plates quietly, like I didn't want to bother the air. Dad scrolled on his iPad at the head of the table. He didn't look up once. Vera's husband strolled in behind her, already laughing at something on his phone. Babe, did you remind Theasa about Friday? I blinked. What's Friday? Vera plopped into a chair and casually dropped, we leave Friday. You'll watch Lucas, right? Everyone nodded like it was already set in stone, like I was the nanny, the dog sitter, the free hotel. I looked around. What trip? Mom laughed softly like I'd missed the memo. Hawaii. We all need a break. The words stuck in my throat. All of them? You mean you're all going? Vera popped a carrot into her mouth. Well, yeah. It's been such a stressful year. Stressful. I took a breath, steadying the shake in my hand. I can't that weekend. I booked a solo retreat up in Estes, just for a few days. It's my birthday. The silence that followed was brief but sharp. Vera tilted her head like she hadn't heard right. Are you serious? Yes. I've had it planned for months. You selfish little brat. Her chair scraped loudly against the tile as she stood. After everything we've done for you. I looked up at her. I've paid this mortgage for 2 years out of my own pocket. Dad finally looked up but said nothing. Vera came around the table. Don't you dare throw that in our faces. Her eyes burned. We give you family, and this is how you repay us. And before I could move, she slapped me. Not hard enough to knock me back, but hard enough that my cheek stung and the room spun for a second. My mother didn't gasp. She didn't stop her. She sighed. Well, someone has to stay behind, Mom muttered, reaching for the mashed potatoes. Don't be so dramatic. I stood there, the whole left side of my face hot, my heart pounding like a drum trapped in a closet. I glanced at Dad. Nothing. Lucas was staring at the table. Even he didn't look up. I sat down slowly, reached for my teacup, the one I always used here. Blue porcelain with tiny forget-me-nots. The only thing in this house that ever felt like it belonged to me. I stared at the way my fingers trembled against the handle. I didn't drink it. I placed it back in the saucer, got up, walked to the sink. Behind me, dishes clinked, chairs scraped. The world just moved on. I wiped my cheek with the edge of my cardigan, turned around, and left. No one called after me. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Lucas. Outside, the wind had picked up. The street lights buzzed with that old humming sound. I got in my car, drove home without turning on the radio. At my apartment, I didn't take my coat off. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled up the banking app I'd used every week for over 2 years. My thumb hovered, then tapped. Cancel, one by one. Mortgage canceled. Grocery auto delivery canceled. Streaming plans tied to their email, gone. Family phone plan, shut down. All of it. And then, under notes, I typed just 2 words, effective immediately. I set the phone down, let the silence fill the room. I could still feel the sting on my cheek, but inside, something else had started to burn. Not rage, not quite. Resolve. 1 hour later, my phone lit up on the table. First call, Mom. Then Vera. Then Vera again. Then Dad. 19 missed calls by the time I opened the group chat. Please call us. We need to talk. I didn't reply. I just stared at the porcelain cup I'd taken from their cabinet years ago. The one they never let me drink from as a kid. The one that was finally mine. I didn't text back. I just sat there staring at that teacup, the one with tiny blue forget-me-nots on porcelain so fine it almost felt like holding silence itself. They never let me use it growing up. It was Mom's favorite and for guests only, but somehow they always found a reason to bring it out for Vera. I wrapped it in a towel last night and slid it into the back of my kitchen drawer. Not out of fear it would break, but because I wasn't ready to touch anything fragile again. Not until I felt solid in my own skin. That morning, light filtered through my blinds in strips, painting faint shadows across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn on music, didn't check the news, just brewed tea in a chipped white mug and sat by the window with my old leather journal, the one with pages yellowed at the edges. I hadn't written in months, maybe years, but I found myself scribbling thoughts I didn't know I'd buried. I was never angry at them for needing me. I was angry they never saw me as someone who could need too. I underlined that. Then my eyes drifted to the phone. It had been on silent since I walked out of that house 2 nights ago. But now it sat on the coffee table like a coiled animal, quiet, but undeniably alive. I picked it up. 34 missed calls. 11 voicemails. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, then tapped play on the first one. Mom's voice, soft but clipped. Hi honey, just wondering if you're okay. Can you give me a call? Second one, Vera. How dare you cancel the mortgage payment? That's our family home, the Asa. You're punishing Lucas just to get back at me. Third voicemail, Dad. His voice was low. Warm. We just want to talk. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I stopped there. The texts were worse, from Vera. Mom hasn't slept all night. She's been crying. I hope you're happy. Then you couldn't even wait until after the trip. Selfish doesn't begin to describe it. I locked the phone, set it face down. I used to believe staying silent made me the better person. But now I was learning that in this family silence didn't buy peace. It invited punishment. And if I didn't explain myself, they'd write the story for me. The notification dinged again. Facebook. Someone had tagged me in a post. It was from a family friend I hadn't seen in years. Just a vague quote in bold letters. Some people forget where they came from. Sad, really. Underneath it, a comment from Aunt Carlin, unbelievable. Turning your back on your own blood. Your mother gave you everything. Gave me everything. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and opened another browser tab. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet, something I hadn't looked at in ages. I started typing, mortgage 24 months 2900 by 24, groceries weekly average 160 by 52, SAT X2, streaming accounts for the whole house, utilities, flights Vera couldn't afford, that time I paid Lucas's private preschool deposit. I kept going, row after row, number after number, line after line of things they called help but never once paid back or even acknowledged. By the time I finished, the total was over $93,000. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, steady breath. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. A soft knock at the door startled me. I froze for a second, then peeked through the peephole. It was Mrs. Howerin, my neighbor. Mid-70s, gray cardigan, holding something in foil. I opened the door slowly. "Morning, sweetheart," she said. "I brought some banana bread. Thought you might like something warm." I blinked. "Thank you. You didn't have to. We heard a bit of yelling the other night," she said gently. "Just wanted to check in." I stepped aside to let her in. She walked like someone who knew how to be quiet in someone else's storm. "I'm learning to be okay," I said, almost more to myself than to her. She nodded, sitting down across from me. Sometimes the kindest thing you can say to people who hurt you is nothing at all. She didn't ask questions, didn't give advice, just left the banana bread and gave me a long, firm hug before heading out. After she left, I rinsed her plate and reached for the mug I'd used that morning. I almost reached for the teacup, but instead, I walked over to the drawer, slid it open slightly, and looked down at the wrapped floral porcelain inside. "Not yet," I whispered. That cup meant something. It always had. It was never about the china. It was about who was allowed to feel delicate, who was granted gentleness, and who was told to toughen up. They gave Vera grace like it was endless. Me? They gave me responsibility, expectations, blame. Later that evening, as the sky turned that bruised shade of purple, my phone buzzed again. "Vera." I opened the message. "If you're going to act like this, maybe it's time we reevaluate whose family." I stared at it. My thumbs hovered. I typed something sharp. Deleted it. Typed something polite. Deleted that too. Then I finally wrote, "I agree." I hit send and I didn't wait for her to reply. I already knew what came next. I didn't wait for her to reply. I already knew what came next, and in a way, that gave me peace. The rest of the evening passed quietly. I made a cup of chamomile tea, watched the sun slip behind the skyline, and folded laundry I'd been ignoring for days. When I finally lay down, I didn't cry. My hands weren't clenched. My chest didn't ache. But I woke up before the alarm just after 6. Something in my chest stirred like a knock I hadn't heard yet but somehow already felt. It came at 10:07 a.m. 3 firm knocks on the door. I paused mid-sip of my coffee. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced out the peephole, and my stomach turned. Vera and Lucas. My sister didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't even pretend to soften her face. She just stood there like she had every right in the world to be on my doorstep. I opened the door halfway, leaning against the frame. I didn't say a word. "Lucas wanted to see you," she said, already nudging the little boy forward like a package on wheels. "Auntie." Lucas beamed, running into my arms before I could react. My body moved on instinct, wrapping him in a hug I hadn't planned. His cheek pressed into my shoulder, his little arms clinging to my waist. My throat tightened. He smelled like peanut butter and sunblock. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I murmured. But over his head, I met Vera's eyes and I didn't smile. She was already stepping inside. Not a glance, not a may I. Not a hint of apology, just full entitlement. She dropped a canvas tote on my couch. Toys spilled out. Plastic dinosaurs, a juice box, one sock. "We're heading to the spa," she said, brushing imaginary lint off her shirt. "Shouldn't be more than a few hours. You're good with him, right?" I blinked. No question. No invitation. Just assumption. Just like always. I stood slowly. Lucas was already settling on the carpet with his T-Rex and pterodactyl. Vera started walking toward the door like she'd just finished placing a takeout order. "Wait," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. She turned, hand on the doorknob, eyebrows raised like I'd just spoken out of turn. "I can't watch him today." Lucas looked up, confused. "Why not?" "I have things I need to do," I said gently, kneeling to his eye level. "But we'll see each other soon, okay? I promise." His little mouth trembled. Did I do something bad? My heart cracked. No, never. You're perfect. This isn't about you." Vera scoffed loudly. "So now you don't love him?" I stood. "Don't do that." "Do what? Point out the obvious?" "No. Twist my boundaries into betrayal." She crossed her arms, lips pursed. "You've always been dramatic. This family bends over backwards for you and you throw it in our faces." I stared at her, feeling the heat rise, but I didn't flinch. "No one bent for me. They bent me. And I finally stopped letting them." She opened her mouth, probably for one of her patented guilt jabs, but I raised a hand. "I love him. But I'm not free labor. Not anymore." The silence between us buzzed with tension. And then, like a switch flipped, she exploded. "This is exactly why no one trusts you," she snapped. "You're unstable, Babysit. One minute you're all about family, the next you act like we're parasites." The words hit something old in me. Something 12, maybe 13 years old. A girl crouched behind the tool shed after saying no to another favor that wasn't really a request, crying into her arms while the world labeled her ungrateful. But I wasn't that girl anymore. And I didn't cry. A door creaked open across the hall. Mrs. Howaren from 3B stepped out, a recycling bin in her hands. She paused, watching the scene. No words, just that firm quiet gaze people develop after living through decades of drama. She nodded just once, slow, measured. Vera noticed. Color rose in her cheeks. She snatched Lucas's bag from the floor, yanked the juice box out like it had offended her. "Well, remember this," she hissed, dragging Lucas by the hand. He looked over his shoulder at me. I mouthed, "It's okay. I love you." He nodded, small and sad. I closed the door, turned the lock, and for the first time after one of these encounters, I didn't collapse. I didn't tremble. I didn't open the cabinet to find comfort food or whiskey or anything else to numb the ache. I just stood there, breathing. Later, I made lunch, tidied the living room, took a long walk around the block. And when I returned, sunlight warm on my back, pulse steady, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Mom. "Come over for dinner. Let's move on from this silly drama." Silly drama. Like it hadn't taken 32 years of my life. I stared at the message, then walked to the drawer under the coffee machine. The floral teacup was still there, wrapped in linen, and used. I didn't touch it, just let my fingers graze the edge of the cloth. Some things aren't ready. Some things take time. I didn't reply to her message. But I knew what I had to do. Around 5:40 p.m., I parked outside the house I once called home. The front yard looked the same. Uneven hedges Dad never trimmed evenly, a porch light flickering like it always did when the weather dipped below 50. I stepped out of the car holding a store-bought apple pie in both hands, not out of guilt, just something to occupy them. As I walked up the steps, I reminded myself, you're not here to fix anything. You're here to see it clearly. The door opened before I even knocked. Mom stood there, lips tight and eyes measuring. I'm glad you came to your senses, she said quietly, then turned and walked away like the matter had been settled. Inside, the smells hit me. Garlic butter, roasted meat, and something lemony, the kind of Sunday dinner that used to mean safety when I was little. Now it just made me feel out of place. I paused in the hallway. Even the pictures on the wall were the same. Lucas's school portraits. Vera's wedding. Mom and Dad's anniversary trip to Napa. None of me. When I stepped into the dining room, the table was already full. Dad at the head carving roast chicken. Vera next to him sipping red wine like she owned the place. Her husband Tyler already halfway through his first plate. Aunt Millie and Aunt Ruth sat opposite each other, gossiping softly between bites. Lucas perked up when he saw me. Auntie. I smiled at him. Just him. Hey bud. There was one empty chair left at the far end, next to the broken radiator that always made winter dinners miserable. I slid into it without a word. Let's not ruin dinner with old arguments, Aunt Millie said, lifting her glass. Let's be grateful we're all together. I nodded slightly. I didn't trust my voice yet. Chatter picked up again. Stories about Hawaii. Photos were passed around on phones. Tyler talked about the snorkeling. Mom went on about the resort's breakfast buffet like it was heaven. No one asked how my week had been. No one mentioned the front porch or Vera's drop-off. Lucas reached for a dinner roll and Vera gently nudged him. Remember how you played with the crabs on the beach? He giggled. They kept hiding. She beamed, then turned to me. Some people really need time alone, I guess. I didn't bite. Just kept cutting my chicken slowly, bite by bite, like each piece was a shield. Then Mom's voice shifted the mood like a cold gust. You know, Lucas told me he was confused why you wouldn't let him stay the other day. The table quieted. Forks slowed. You hurt his feelings, she added. Kids remember that kind of thing. Dad chimed in. Family helps family, Talesa. Even when it's inconvenient. I laid my fork down calmly, carefully. I looked around the table. Not one face looked surprised. Just waiting like a script had been passed around earlier and I hadn't gotten a copy. I've given more to this family than anyone in this room, I said, voice steady. And not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I loved you. I looked directly at Dad. But love isn't supposed to look like servitude. He opened his mouth, but I cut in. Did you know I paid your hospital bill last year when insurance didn't cover the scans? Silence. His jaw twitched. No. I nodded. Didn't think so. Even Aunt Ruth stopped mid-chew. The tension was so thick you could have cut it with the butter knife no one was using. Vera gave a sharp little laugh. Well, someone's been keeping receipts. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small white envelope, plain, sealed. I walked it over and set it gently between my parents. What's this? Mom asked, brows pinched. Just a few facts, I said. Contributions made year by year, broken down by category. Mortgage help. School tuition. Medical bills. Groceries. Flights. Everything. Dad picked it up like it might bite him. Opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. He blinked hard. Mom looked over his shoulder, her voice cracked. "This can't be right." "It is," I said. "I've got copies and receipts and every transaction marked." No one said a word. I looked at Lucas, who was quietly picking at his mashed potatoes, his little brow furrowed. I softened my voice. "I will always love you, sweet boy. But grown-ups have to learn when enough is enough." I picked up my coat. "Wait, are you leaving already?" Aunt Millie asked. "I didn't wait for dessert," I said, sliding my arms through the sleeves. "I have somewhere more important to be." I turned toward the door, passing the hallway photos one last time. And I didn't look back. I didn't wait for dessert. I had somewhere more important to be. By the time I stepped into my apartment, the sky had turned to charcoal gray. Rain tapped lightly against the kitchen window, soft, steady, like a metronome for the resolve that had built inside me all evening. I took off my coat, hung it with care, then pulled out the envelope I'd left untouched all day, the same one I'd laid on that dinner table like a quiet explosion. The envelope was just the beginning. I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of mint tea, still warm from the thermos I'd packed before dinner. My fingers moved without hesitation. Folder after folder opened. Bank statements. Venmo transfers. Notarized documents. Screenshots. Emails. For years, I'd been told I was too sensitive, too generous, or, worst of all, doing the right thing because you're the responsible one. But tonight I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Family Contributions, Independent Claim. It felt like I was writing a quiet eulogy to the woman I used to be. Each PDF I saved and labeled with precision. February 2020, Mom's dental bill. June 2021, Dad's hospital copay. Christmas 2022, rent covered for Vera when her business venture flopped, and so on. Every line a memory, every dollar a scar. I wasn't suing. I wasn't asking for a refund. I was drawing a line, the kind that would need a signature. The next morning I made an appointment at a local notary's office just off Main Street, the kind of place that still smelled faintly of ink and old linoleum. The receptionist looked up, startled when I walked in holding a manila folder so stuffed it barely shut. A man in his 60s called my name. He had a quiet, weathered face and the kind of voice that didn't rush. I liked him instantly. We sat in a narrow office, walls lined with certificates and a dusty plant in the corner. I laid everything out and told him calmly what I wanted to do. I want to formally sever all shared financial ties to my family. Going forward, I will not be liable for my parents' mortgage, utilities, health insurance, or anything tied to my name. I paused, then added, "I'd like that in legal terms." He leaned back, skimming the printouts. When he reached the final total, he blinked. $93,000. That's what you've contributed? I nodded once. Yes. And I'm not seeking repayment. But I am stating on record that it ends now. He looked at me differently after that. Less like a client, more like a woman who'd been through something quiet and long. He didn't ask why. He just wrote, slowly, carefully. When he finished, he slid the document across the desk. "This covers the financial severance. You'll need to sign here and here." I signed, hand steady. Then I pulled out one last sheet I had drafted at home the night before. A simple statement in plain language: any future financial dependency must be arranged by written agreement with full consent. All emotional debts are considered null and void. I slid that across too. Please add this as an attachment. He didn't flinch. Understood. By that afternoon, I was back in my apartment. The silence felt clean, not heavy. I scanned the signed papers, attached them to an email, and filled in 3 recipients: Mom, Dad, Vera. Subject line, effective today. No pleasantries, no explanation, just the attached documents and a line that said, "This is not a threat. This is closure." I hit send. Then I walked to the kitchen, refilled my tea, and opened the window just a crack, enough to let in the late autumn breeze that smelled faintly of pine and something colder. The responses came fast. First from my mother, "Is this a joke?" Then Vera, "This is how you treat the people who raised you? You should be ashamed of yourself." And finally Dad, "So this is what we mean to you now, a number? You really want the world to see how selfish you've become?" I didn't reply. Not to one of them. Instead, I clicked into my phone settings and started the process to change my number. It took less than 5 minutes. Funny how quick a door can close once you stop holding it open. Later that night I curled up on the couch and let the day settle into my bones. I thought back to something my therapist had said the week before. She'd asked, "Do you feel guilty or free?" I'd whispered, "Both." But sitting there now, warm cup in hand, inbox closed, phone silent, I knew I felt free. At 11:47 p.m. a new email pinged from my father. Subject: "We need to talk before this gets out of hand." I stared at it for a moment, then quietly shut the laptop. The teacup was still on the table lid untouched. "Not yet." I didn't reply to his email, but I knew he was coming. And sure enough, by Monday morning the air already felt strange before I even stepped into work. It wasn't the weather. It was that tightness in my chest that whispered, "Be ready." I brushed it off as leftover nerves from everything I'd sent the night before, but the tension didn't go away. I arrived a little early like I always do, hoping for a quiet moment with my tea and inbox before the day began. I was halfway through reviewing a grant proposal when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. It was Tasha, one of the front desk staff. She leaned in and said gently, "There's someone in the lobby asking for you." My first instinct was confusion. I wasn't expecting anyone. I followed her down the hallway, my heels clicking a little too sharply against the linoleum floor. And then I saw him. My father, button-down shirt, freshly ironed, hair combed with more care than usual, smile too wide to be sincere. Next to him stood my mother, quiet, arms folded but eyes sharp, watching everything including me. I stopped short. Tasha turned to me, uncertain. "Should I?" "No, I've got it," I said, masking the chill crawling up my spine with a steady nod. "Thanks, Tasha." I walked closer. "What are you doing here?" My father spread his arms as if we were at a backyard barbecue. "Just wanted to check in. You've been hard to reach." I could feel the receptionist glancing over from her desk, a client shifting in the waiting area. My mother said nothing, just offered the same look I'd seen on her face since I was a kid. Judgment wrapped in silence. My father's voice carried a little too much. "You're not answering our calls. We were worried. Thought something happened to you." I knew exactly what this was. They didn't come here to check on me. They came to stage a scene. "Let's step outside," I said, my voice clipped. He smiled like we were catching up after church and followed. My mother trailed behind, close enough for effect. Once we stepped out into the courtyard, their tone shifted. "You humiliated us," my mother said, low and sharp, not even waiting for pleasantries. My father added, "That email, are you serious? Legal forms? What, you think you're above your own family now?" I didn't say a word. I let them talk. "You think we're going to be bullied by a letter," he continued. "You don't scare us, Beasa. You're just proving how selfish you are." My arms stayed crossed, calm. I didn't flinch. He gestured vaguely toward the building behind me. What would your boss think, huh? All this talk about serving the community and you cut off your own parents. Real nice. I met his eyes. This has nothing to do with my job. He leaned in. Doesn't it? This whole nonprofit thing, isn't that supposed to be about compassion, generosity? Maybe you should start at home. That last line, it almost made me laugh. But then came the one that didn't. My mother's voice cut in, low and bitter. You'll regret this when we're gone. Just like you regretted that abortion. Time stopped. My breath caught, but not from shame, from shock and something sharper. They still use that, even now, even here. I looked at her, really looked, and realized for the first time how small she seemed. Not in stature, in spirit. Still trying to use old wounds to control me. Something broke free in me at that moment and something else solidified. Don't ever speak to me again, I said. My voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It was level. Final. I turned and walked back inside without looking back. I didn't care if anyone saw because I was done hiding. Back at my desk, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't move for a while, just stared at the blinking cursor on the screen while my heart slowly returned to its normal rhythm. An hour passed, then came a soft knock on my door. It was Angela, my manager. She stepped in gently. Everything okay out there? I paused, then nodded slightly. It's my parents. They showed up to make a scene. She raised an eyebrow, took a seat beside me. You don't owe me details, but if it ever happens again, just say the word. Security will step in. I hesitated, then added, they're upset I've set some boundaries. They're trying to make it look like I'm the bad one. Angela nodded slowly. We've got your back here. This is your space. You're safe. It was the first time I'd heard someone say that to me with no strings attached. That afternoon, after our usual community clinic session, I was cleaning up brochures when an older client, Miss Hensley, walked in and placed a small paper bag on my desk. Thought you might like these, she said, her voice warm. Inside were homemade oatmeal cookies. A sticky note taped to the top read, "You help people. Don't forget who you are." I smiled. The kind that wells up from somewhere deeper than just politeness. This was my family now. The people I chose. The ones who saw me without needing to take from me. Later that evening I returned home with quiet gratitude. I changed into sweats, brewed some tea and finally opened the box that had been sitting on my desk since Saturday. Inside, the antique teacup wrapped in soft linen was a folded note. My grandmother's handwriting still neat and steady. You are the answer to every woman who couldn't speak. I traced the curve of her letters with my finger. The tears didn't fall, not because I wasn't moved but because for once I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. And that realization sat with me like a quiet weight on my chest. All night I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing, not out of fear but because something inside me had shifted finally and fully. I sat at my kitchen table, still in the oversized sweatshirt I wore to bed. The morning light was just peeking through the blinds when I opened my laptop. I didn't plan it. I didn't outline or rehearse. I just started typing. I used to think being a good daughter meant giving without limits. It meant silence, sacrifice, swallowing hurt and smiling through it. I thought loyalty meant losing yourself for others. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I missed birthdays, vacations, rest, so they could live freely. I paid bills that weren't mine, babysat when no one else would, absorbed blame to keep peace. And when I finally said no, I was called selfish. I didn't name anyone. No photos, no gossip. Just the truth wrapped in my voice. If you're carrying more than your share in a family that never asks how you're doing, this is for you. Your silence isn't love, it's fear. And you deserve more. I added no hashtags, no dramatic punctuation. Just sent. Then I posted it to Facebook. I copied the same text onto LinkedIn, where I'd mostly kept things professional. Then on a small community healing forum I'd joined months ago when the spiral started, just to see if it might help someone else. I closed the laptop. Then I sat in silence, watching a cardinal land on the railing outside. I had no expectations, no idea if anyone would even see it. The next morning I woke up to 142 unread notifications. By the time I poured my coffee, my inbox had doubled. A message from a woman in Ohio. I thought I was the only one. One from a man in Kansas City. You gave me language for my own pain. Someone had shared it to a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. Then another forum picked it up. It landed on a mental health blog, and somehow it grew. Over 12,000 shares in 48 hours. I don't think I breathed properly for a full day. But it wasn't fear that gripped me. It was connection. People didn't just read. They saw me. Then came Vera's voicemail. Her voice had that sharp performative hiss I knew too well. You think this is brave, it's pathetic. You're airing dirty laundry like some attention-seeking martyr. Everyone's laughing at you. I didn't even flinch. I deleted it. Blocked her number. An hour later, a text from my mother popped up. What you did was cruel. We didn't raise you to humiliate your family in public. Think of your sister's job. Think of your nephew. That one stung. Not because I felt guilty, but because I realized she still didn't get it. I blocked her too. Then came the email from an assistant at a tech firm I didn't recognize. Apparently Vera's employer. They requested a clarification conversation regarding recent conduct allegations tied to online commentary. I hadn't named Vera, but apparently others had made the connection themselves. I hadn't dragged anyone into the light. People had started dragging themselves, and not everyone was mad. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged, I always knew something was off. Thank you for saying what none of us could. My Aunt Mary, Dad's oldest sister, wrote, they made you carry everything. I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. You deserved better. Some family members fell silent. Others took sides. But for the first time the unspoken split open, and I wasn't the only one standing on my side of the line. That evening I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize lit up the screen. I hesitated, then picked up. Aunt Elisa? I sat down slowly. Lucas? His little voice was unsure but hopeful. I was wondering, do you want to come to my school's author night next week? You don't have to, but I want you to. You're my favorite. My chest tightened. I pressed my palm to my heart. I'd love to, sweetheart. I really would. After we hung up I stayed seated for a long time. Not sad, not shaken, just steady. Maybe the cycle wouldn't end in one generation, but with me it would change. That night as I washed the last dish and turned off the kitchen light, I whispered to myself, they don't own my story anymore. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the box I'd carried with me from apartment to apartment. Inside, wrapped in soft linen, was my grandmother's journal. The leather cracked slightly as I opened it. A sticky note clung to the front cover. Her handwriting small but unmistakable. Finish what I started. I held the journal against my chest and closed my eyes. After the call with Lucas ended, I just sat there in the quiet, letting his words echo like warm wind through a long-locked room. My hand rested near the drawer. I didn't need to think twice. I slid it open. Inside, Beneath old tax envelopes and a few greeting cards I'd never had the heart to throw out, lay the journal, leather-bound, worn at the corners. A yellow sticky note clung to its cover like it had waited for me for decades. Finish what I started. The handwriting was unmistakable, my grandmother's, soft but decisive, with the kind of tilt only women who wrote while balancing a child on their hip seemed to have. I sat back on the couch and opened it to the first page. May 12, 1967, my husband says I'm selfish for resting, but I worked a double shift and I still cooked. I kept reading. July 9th, they say a mother should give everything, but I wonder who gives to the mother. The entries were short, never more than a few lines. But every sentence felt like it had waited decades to be read out loud. Some were simple. He told me not to talk at dinner. Said my stories were embarrassing. They said I wasn't trying hard enough. I bled through my shoes that day. Others made me sit up straighter. They only loved me when I was useful. That line had been underlined twice in bold, angry strokes that had slightly torn the page beneath it. I pressed my fingers to the words. My grandmother had been the quiet one in every family story. The peacemaker, the one who made fudge from scratch and hand-sewed costumes for the school play. No one talked about the way she worked nights, or how Grandpa would sulk for hours if dinner wasn't hot. And no one ever mentioned that she saw the same things I did, that she noticed, that she hurt, that she fought, even if only with ink and silence. I read on. Her entries were never about revenge. She wasn't bitter. But she saw, and in seeing, she resisted quietly, powerfully. Near the back I found the last page. It was dated just weeks before she passed. I leave this to the granddaughter I hope will break the chain. If you are reading this, you already have. There was a dried daffodil taped to the margin, pressed so carefully its petals had kept their shape. And just like that I was back in her garden again. I must have been 9. She'd worn one of those sun hats with the wide brim and handed me a tiny shovel. She'd said, "These will come back, even if winter tries to kill them." I hadn't understood then. Now I did. The next morning I woke early. Didn't eat, didn't speak. I just got in the car and drove to the cemetery on Maple Ridge. It wasn't far, but I took the long route, the one that curved past the school Lucas went to. A strange comfort knowing his voice had cracked through years of silence the night before. At the grave, I knelt without needing to say anything rehearsed. I placed the journal gently on her headstone. "I see you," I whispered. "You weren't invisible. I promise you weren't." I kept the daffodil. It felt right. Later, as I stood in my kitchen rinsing a mug, an email pinged through. Subject: Your story matters. It was from a journalist I didn't know. "Hi Talesa, I came across your post this week. I'm working on a series about generational family trauma. How cycles continue. How people break them. Would you be open to talking? Your voice, it could help so many." I leaned on the counter and stared at the words. For most of my life I had avoided spotlights. They made it harder to disappear, and disappearing had once felt like the safest thing to do. But maybe that wasn't true anymore. Maybe silence had protected them, not me. Maybe the point wasn't attention. Maybe the point was light. I replied slowly, fingers steady. "Yes, but only if I can bring her words too." The daffodil now rested in a tall glass next to the sink, catching morning light like it had been waiting for spring, and I finally understood. I didn't want to punish anyone anymore. I wanted to end it. To be the last link in a chain that had bound women in my family for too long. And for once, it felt like the world wasn't just ready to listen. It was listening. So the morning after I replied to the journalist, the world didn't shift. The sky was still soft gray. My neighbor's sprinklers still hissed against the sidewalk. But something inside me felt looser, like a knot I'd lived with for years had finally begun to untangle. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, out of habit, not nerves. It was the little place near the library, quiet, with mismatched mugs and windows that let the light spill across wooden tables. I chose a corner booth and sipped black coffee, no cream, just how Grandma used to take it. The doorbell chimed. She walked in with gentle steps, a worn leather satchel over her shoulder. The journalist, Amanda, looked to be in her 50s, her face lined with time, not tension. Her smile was steady. She didn't reach for her recorder. Not yet. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. No pressure today. I just want to listen. That surprised me more than it should have. She leaned in slightly, fingers laced around her mug. So tell me why you wrote that post. I watched the steam rise between us, then answered softly but surely. Because I didn't want another girl to grow up thinking her only worth was what she gave up. Amanda didn't interrupt. She just nodded, her pen resting idle. So I kept talking, not in a rush, not like someone finally given a mic, just like a woman telling the truth after carrying it too long. I talked about babysitting while everyone else drank piña coladas in Maui. About working 2 jobs while they borrowed my car and left me with empty tanks. About the way my mother once said, "You're so good at giving. It's your gift." As if that meant I had no right to stop. I told her about the slap. The way my sister laughed like it was nothing. The way I stood there, hand to cheek, realizing they didn't see me. Not really. I walked away, I said, voice steady. Not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop shrinking. I paused, then reached into my purse, pulled out the daffodil I'd pressed inside a notebook the night before. And this is from the woman who taught me what silence costs. Amanda's eyes flicked to the flower, her brows furrowed, not in confusion but in reverence. My grandmother wrote in secret. She never raised her voice, but in the quiet, she resisted. And somehow, she handed me the strength to do what she couldn't. Amanda finally picked up her pen. Would you mind, she asked, if I included her words too? I smiled. That's the only reason I said yes. 2 weeks passed. I didn't ask for updates. Didn't refresh anything. I kept watering my balcony herbs. I read. I listened to jazz while doing dishes. Then one morning my coworker texted me a link. The ones who stay behind, the price of family silence. There it was, my name, my face, soft lit in that cafe corner, the daffodil photo, yellow and brave. And below it, a quote from Grandma's journal. They only loved me when I was useful. I hope she chooses something else. It spread quietly at first, then further than I ever imagined. Women's advocacy forums picked it up. A university sociology seminar featured it in a class on intergenerational roles. Strangers messaged me, not with pity, but with stories of their own. Their own sacrifices. Their own turning points. Not one person from my family reached out. But I didn't feel abandoned. I felt unburdened. Then one night, my phone buzzed. Lucas. I hesitated, not out of resentment, just surprise. I picked up. He didn't say hello. Auntie. Mom's really mad. I sighed gently. I figured. A pause. Then softer. But I'm not. I waited. I read your article. All of it. And I think I want to be like you. Tears welled up before I could stop them. Just promise me something, I whispered, voice thin. Yeah. Never let anyone shame you for choosing peace. Not even the people who say they love you. He didn't respond right away. But when he did, it was with something that didn't sound like a kid anymore. I won't. That evening, I got an email from the local women's center. They were hosting a community night. Stories of women reclaiming their roles. Shedding generations of quiet. Would I come? Would I share? I almost said no. But then I looked at the journal again, at Grandma's spidery cursive. If you are reading this, you already have. So I said, yes, but only if I could read her words too. That night, under soft lighting and surrounded by folding chairs filled with women, old, young, shaking, nodding, I read. Not just about me. About her. About all of us. There were tears, laughter, a kind of silence that doesn't shut down but opens up. And the next morning, I noticed something on the balcony. A single daffodil had bloomed. Not from a bulb I'd planted. It had grown from the soil where I'd once shaken loose dried petals from Grandma's last flower. I stepped outside, breathed in the soft air, and picked it gently. I tucked it behind my ear and walked inside, past the shelf of unpaid bills I no longer carried, past the photo frame I'd finally put up of myself at the beach. Smiling. Truly smiling. Not as someone's caretaker. Not as the fallback plan. Just as me.